Will the real Captain Marvel please stand up? Sorry, y'all. Just could not help myself. As far as I'm concerned, Shazam is the real Captain Marvel. The other one does not count. We will not discuss that any further. But there was reference to Captain Marvel when they were talking in this movie about names for Shazam, you know, or the different names for the characters. And there was a reference to that, which I thought was kind of funny, to the point that I wrote it down. Now, this movie, I'll start off by telling you there are post-credit scenes. There's two of them, one in the middle or a little bit after the initial credits, and then one at the very, very end. And the one at the very, very end, it's not like a 2-second thing like what happened at the end of Scream, which was super annoying. It's actually something that's relevant to a potential continuation of a storyline. Same thing with the mid-credit scene. I'm really curious as to where James Gunn is supposed to be going based on certain things that happen in this movie. However, maybe that curiosity is for nothing because the Flash movie is going to undo everything. So, whatever. Oh, I don't know why the heck that shot's in there. That's behind the scenes. Oops, sorry about that. I forgot to take it out. Okay. All right. Shazam 2, or Shazam Fury of the Gods. It's been a bit since I saw the first Shazam. Now, I remember that I liked the first Shazam okay. It wasn't anything that was super impactful to me. I wasn't super in love with it. It was all right. It felt a bit lightweight. I am someone who generally likes my comic book / superhero movies to be gritty and dark and have something that's really substantial that's going on, some serious conflicts, some serious life or death situations happening. And so I am not usually a big fan of light and fluffy comic book type of films. Black Adam was one of those types of films. Shazam is it's like that type. Anyway, there are some Marvel films that I feel kind of veer in the light and fluffy, silly territory, especially now. It feels like more of that is happening as they're sort of, I don't know, dumbing down their quality for audiences. Anyway, so this movie series, it's not like right up there with my top, other comic book superhero films. I feel like I enjoyed this one a little bit more than the first, but I might just be misremembering, because maybe if I rewatched the first, I would feel like, oh yeah, no, the first one's better. But the premise of the story is these gods have come to this realm and they've got some revenge on their mind. And I remember when I saw the trailer, I remember thinking, and I even made a comment about this somewhere, I can't remember where, but I remember thinking that Helen Mirren looked kind of silly and goofy in here. And I was like, wow, because there was like a scene where it showed her, she's like doing like this. And I was like, man, she has lowered herself to this ridiculous role. And she's just it's going to be so goofy and terrible. And she's such a good actor. And I have to say that she did not come across as much like that to me in the movie as she does in the trailer. So that was a pleasant surprise. I was happy about that. So, it has that going for it. Something else that I liked about this movie is that, well, it's just a part in this movie, was that, so in the trailer, there's a scene where Shazam throws this bus at a dragon, and he makes some sort of comment about, oh, I threw a bus at a dragon, I love my job, or something goofy like that. And it was lame. I like Zachary Levi, nothing against him, but that line was just like, that is so goofy, that is so cringe. That line was not in the movie. He does throw something at the dragon. They didn't take that part out, but I did not hear that line, and I was waiting to see when it was going to happen, and it didn't show up. So that was a plus. The premise of the movie, the storyline of the movie has ties to things that happen in the first one, which I liked also because it kind of connects the two. So you could watch 1 and 2 back to back and it wouldn't be completely seamless because there has been time that has passed. I mean, it's been 4 years since the other movie and these kids have grown up. You can tell they're quite a bit older. And this movie does take place, from what I understand, a few years later. I can't remember how old Billy Batson was supposed to be in the first one. What, 14 maybe? And in this one, he's almost 18. So they have followed the actual span of time. So it doesn't feel terribly weird to see that these kids are so much older. So that fit. And, yeah, like I said, ties to the first movie, but it's not like a back-to-back sort of thing. However, you could watch them back-to-back, and like I said, the elements from the first that tie into what's going on in this movie, because there's something that happens in the first movie that is a direct cause of what's going on in this film. So I like that. So, I like that continuation of the storyline, the plot, sort of weaving it all together. Now, I'm going to sort of move on to things that I wasn't as crazy about. And I don't completely hate this movie. I actually think I enjoyed it better than Black Adam because I felt like there was even though this film series is kind of cartoonish and goofy, Shazam is my brother's favorite character, but he was not happy with the first movie because he wanted it darker and they went and turned it juvenile. I mean, that's kind of what they did. And I even mentioned to Arturo after I got out of the theater that the Shazam movies are like the kiddie pool of superhero movies. That's what this reminds me of. And so that's why it's just not up there on my top list of superhero movies that I like, just because it's just too kiddie. And the actors did a fine job. They were fine. I especially liked the little girl, the youngest little girl. The way the adult version of her acts is so in line with the way she acts as the child. It's cute. Anyway, I liked her performance. But because it's so kindergarten or elementary or kiddie pool, it just doesn't have the depth to it that I like in a superhero film. It does feel like it's got a little bit more depth than the first one, and there is something that happens at the end that I was like, oh, I actually like what's going on here, because it surprised me that this happened, that this particular thing happened. I thought that the movie was going to be completely lighthearted, nothing was going to be at risk, and then something happened. It was like, oh wow, okay. That was later adjusted, but still, the explanation or the reason for why things were adjusted made sense. It was, so I wasn't like rolling my eyes, oh, of course. But I did like that this darker sort of thing happened at the end, gave this film a little bit more weight to me, for me as a viewer. But some of the lines in here, the dialogue and the humor between the characters, especially the kids and with the wizard, I like that. I thought that was pretty well done. But some of the lines in here that certain characters had just did not come off very well. Well, specifically, one character whose performance surprised me. Like I said, I had expected Helen Mirren's character to be just so cringe and terrible, and it would just be so awful. But the one that surprised me the most was the performance of Lucy Liu. Now, I like Lucy Liu. She's a good actor. And there are definitely parts in here where she's fine, but I feel like the material that she was given, the delivery was just, it was cringe. It was cringe to me, like goosebump on my skin cringe, because it just felt so overly dramatic and ridiculous and over the top. There's like a line she says, I'll just give you an example. It's not going to be anything spoilery, but she says something like, "This ends now." And it was just like, oh, that's just so lame. And that's her line. Maybe she delivered it to the best of her ability. Maybe it was just the fact that the material was just so, or you know, that the scene with her and her over the topness. I don't know. Maybe I feel like it was the lines. I feel like it was the script, and the lines given to her were just. I didn't like some of those moments with her particular character in these dramatic lines, sort of one-liner type of things that she would throw out there. It just didn't come across as authentic. It was goofy to me. It was your stereotypical sort of over-the-top baddie, you know, I have all the power now. You know, that sort of thing. Just like, it didn't work for me, and it surprised me. It surprised me so much that I wrote it down. I wrote Lucy Liu cartoonish. Thought Helen Mirren would be. So that I was not expecting. So that's a con for me. And also, like I've already mentioned, you know, this is kind of like the kiddie pool of superhero movies. Another thing that really stuck out as kind of ridiculous to me was there's a character, the Pedro Pena is his name. So there was all this talk. Oh, Shazam is confirmed. They're going to have this gay superhero. And so like, okay, all right. I went looking him up, and there's no confirmation about this at all about the character in the comics. So of course, you know how they have to add things in and change things up, you know, for the times. It's silly, but sometimes if it's handled properly, it's not intrusive. Okay, that was not the case in here. They make it very clear that he's gay, but what was the point of it? There was no point except to just say that he was, so that everybody knows he is. It was so clunky when that particular moment happened that it felt so obviously shoehorned in for no other reason than to just say, oh, he is. I get the point. I know why they did it, because that's the way they do nowadays. But it didn't flow naturally or organically, and it had nothing to do with the plot at all. And it just came across as super obvious that they're trying to let everybody know they're going to be real super inclusive about everything. And I thought that was not handled very well. So that stood out to the point that I wrote it down, because that was cringe as well. I saw the reviews for this film. I haven't watched any reviews or read any reviews, but I didn't look at any of them until after I got out of the movie theater. And I was surprised to find out that this movie is rating quite a bit lower than the first one. I think the first one has like a 90% with critics. I don't think the first one's 90%, y'all. I would not rate it as high as that. I would give it maybe a 70, 75 or whatever. I would actually rate this one about the same, or maybe a skosh higher, just because, well, not just because, but partially because there's a cameo in here that made me so excited. I was so happy. And I wasn't expecting it, y'all. I was not expecting this, but I was like, I was very happy to see that. That definitely bumped this one up a little bit higher for me than the first one. And also just because of the thing that happened at the end that I thought gave it a bit more weight and seriousness. But it did surprise me that the critics didn't like it as much. And I'm curious to find out what the audience reaction is going to be. I feel like the audience might rate this one lower than they did the first one. Audience reviews for pretty high too. They're like in the mid 80s. Like I said, I wouldn't rate it that high. I wouldn't even rate this movie as high as the 80s either. Like I said, probably in the 75%. Maybe the first one's 70, maybe this one's 75%. The dragon was cool. And the scenes of Lucy Liu on the dragon, that was cool. They even made a reference to Khaleesi, which I was thinking that when I was watching it. And then he made some sort of comment about Khaleesi. I was like, that's funny. I see what you did there. But I'm thinking that by now, the fatigue of superhero movies is becoming a thing. And I know that sometimes there have been articles written to try to explain away why some crowds didn't like certain comic book movies, superhero movies, because of superhero fatigue. And sometimes I feel like those were written as excuses for why a particular movie didn't perform very well. Maybe because audiences just didn't like the writing, they didn't like what they did to the characters, you know, the bastardization of characters that has been a thing. So I'm wondering if that's also going to be a sentiment that is shared in articles. And if it is, I feel that this time perhaps it's a good explanation, because while there weren't things in here that made me just hate this film outright, because I absolutely don't, I would watch it again. It just doesn't carry the weight to it that several of the earlier comic book movies that we have been given did. And they are trying to make this very kid-friendly. There are deaths that occur in here. There's violence that occurs in here, but you're not seeing blood. You don't see gore. It's very maybe CW-ish type of, you know, for young adults, but not too blatant and nasty, and something that younger kids can see and appreciate. And that's just not the type of comic book movie that I think a lot of fans of comics are drawn to. I think they want to see a lot more seriousness in the subject matter. A lot of them are getting to the point where they feel more cartoony than anything else. And while I did like the interaction of the characters in here, and I did like the overall storyline just fine, and I love the cameo that happened, this is just not one of the deeper films for me. And so because of that, I can't rate it hugely on up there. I can't rate it way down here either. It's okay. I'm trying to think of the latest comic book movie I saw. Jeez. Gosh, see, some of them are just not making a huge impression on me if I can't even remember the last one. I know there's been one since Black Adam. Oh, Ant-Man. Okay, I like this more than Ant-Man. Yeah, I think I like this more than Ant-Man. Mostly because this doesn't take place in the quantum realm. This takes place on Earth, which I much prefer. Anyway, yeah. Those are kind of my rambling, meandering thoughts on Shazam! Fury of the Gods. I did like the mythological stuff that they tied into it, because these gods are the daughters of Atlas. I think they said Atlas. Wait, shoot. They were the daughter. I thought they were the daughters of Atlas. Let me double check. Yes, they are the daughters of Atlas. So they tied in mythological stuff. We got to see different mythological creatures like minotaurs and other creatures. So that was kind of cool. And I don't feel like the CGI was too terrible as far as that went. I really did like the dragon. I said that already. I thought the dragon was really cool. But yeah. So this is just kind of, it was enjoyable. I wouldn't mind watching it again. I would definitely prefer to rewatch Shazam 1 and 2 as opposed to Ant-Man Quantumania. So that's not really saying a ton, but still. Okay, I don't think I have anything else. I've gone on longer than I really meant to, and I've touched on everything that is worth talking about for me. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up, and we'll see you guys later. Bye.